Okay, class, this is our LOL food chain and the 10% rule. So we've talked about the 10% rule, meaning that if I have a certain amount of energy in an ecosystem, each organism that consumes another organism will only receive 10% of that available energy. And that is because organisms use energy to live. So 90% of the organism's energy is used to breathe and move and digest and live, and only 10% is what's consumed by the predator or consumer as that organism is eaten. So, these first three examples are just examples of how the 10% rule looks when it comes to numbers. So, a kilocalorie is just an energy, chemical energy measurement. And so, number one here gives you an example, and it's color coded for each level of the trophic pyramid. So, if I have 1200 kilocalories that all of my producers are producing, only 12 kilocalories will be passed on to that second level, which would be first, primary consumers or, usually herbivores. And then those herbivores are consumed, or those primary consumers are consumed by secondary consumers or omnivores, and only 1.2 kilocalories of all of the energy is available for those organisms, right? Then they're consumed by apex predators or our tertiary consumers, and those top organisms only have about 0.12 kilocalories left based on this number. So if you want to calculate that, you really simply just multiply the number that you had previously by zero point 0.1, and that's going to actually give you the actual number of calories. Now, in an ecosystem, this number would be ginormous because there's so much energy, chemical energy that we use. But this really illustration helps us understand with numbers how the 10% rule works. So you're going to fill in number two and number three based on number one. Just practice that, just so you can practice seeing how those numbers work out. And then you are going to learn about LOL diagrams. So an LOL diagram is really a bar graph. And so this picture here is showing us an LOL diagram for the first step in a food chain, actually. So we learned about food chains. And so this is a food chain that I chose, and it's based on like a food chain I might see at my house. I have boxwood plants in my front yard, and then we have ants, and I've actually seen a hawk pick up a snake out of my backyard, which is really kind of cool. So this is a food chain, right? The boxwood is our producer, and so I'm creating a diagram here where I'm saying there's 1,000 kilocalories in my ecosystem, and all of that energy is available with the boxwoods. So that's a bar graph saying before the boxwood has this much energy. And this circle here is my system. So it's just going to list every organism in my food chain is inside the circle, saying that's my system. Saying sunlight is what puts energy into my system, and that each time there's a consumer, 90% of the energy is lost as heat ultimately from all those things it takes for organisms to live, like to grow, to reproduce, to make energy, to breathe, all of those things. So this is one example that I want you to use as kind of your guide to make your own LOL diagram. So I have my food chain here. I got a boxwood. That's 100% of my calories would be 1,000. And then only 10% is passed on to that, right? That secondary, that primary consumer, the herbivore that eats the plant. So there's 10 kilocalories here in this bar here. And you can draw this on your paper with pen and paper, pencil, colored pencils that I have available. But you're going to make your own food chain. So you're going to decide what four organisms you want to pick from whatever environment you want. And essentially, your first LOL diagram for number one below will look really similar to this. You might have different numbers, it's up to you, but you're just going to have different organisms here. And then your second LOL diagram will have to start out with this diagram. It's going to look exactly the same as what you finished with before, but only 10% of 10 will be passed on. So you're going to start over here on the left with the ants having 10, and then over here on the right, it would look like the snake would have just 10% of 10, so even smaller. So those bars are going to get really, really small as you build. You're going to do this with pen, pencil, paper, you're hand drawing it. I'm at home, so I had to do it using a drawing, but you get to draw it with hand drawn. And so if you look at the instructions, it says you're going to decide on a food chain from the ecosystem of your choice. It could be a marine ecosystem, an aquatic ecosystem, desert, tundra, forest, tropical, or mountainous ecosystem. I don't care. Letting you be creative. Pick a place you like. Pick an area of nature you like. Try to avoid using humans in your diagrams just because we're kind of an outlier here. And then you're going to illustrate the flow of energy for each organism in the food chain at each trophic level by showing the 10% rule as energy is lost while organisms move, reproduce, breathe, etc. until they're consumed. And you can use that example again that I showed you. So this first one here, you can just draw something very similar, but you can decide on your organisms for your food chain from wherever you want it to be. So really, I would just, if I were you, I would draw the exact same thing pretty much, just change the names of the organisms and use that as a reference point. And then for number 2, again, you're going to show that you start out with what you finished here. So this diagram for this L is what it's going to look like in this L. And then you'll show really the same thing's going to happen. You're just going to have smaller and smaller diagrams where the energy is getting smaller and smaller. So for number 2, you'll have, for me, it would be the ant over here has a bar, and then 90% of energy is lost. And then the bar would be with the, what did I say? With the snake over here, and it would be even smaller. It'd be 10% of 10, so 1, right? And then I would come over here, and the little bitty bar would be what we start with for number 3, right? And then over here, it would be 0.1%. Is that correct? Yeah. So really, I guess you only need 3 here, right? We got producer, right? And then primary consumer, secondary consumer, right? This will be the snake, and then this would be your tertiary consumer. So the 4th would be, you could add a 5th, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this and give you more room to draw. So you'll just have 3 on yours. You'll have 1, 2, and 3. And then what you're going to do is then you're going to sketch your food chain. So much like you saw in the PowerPoints, you can draw little sketches of those animals and show the flow and energy with the arrows between each one. All right, thank you guys. If you have questions, you can email me. I hope this works out for you guys today. I'll see you tomorrow for sure.